Now, just to give you house rules, how this is going to work, we will have speakers who will be here, and because I see we have a full house, and we want to make sure that this is as interactive as possible. So we want to make sure that you ask questions to those, to a particular panelist that has said what you might be interested in. So let's not also have 3 questions in one breath. So I'll ask a question, and my second one is this, my third one is this. I'll be honest with you, I'll be so dictatorial and ask you, you can download also from the website. So that's the way things are going to be. So without further ado, may I call the president of the African Development Bank Group to give us his remarks. Sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the land of 1,000 hills. Actually, I'm sure there are more than 1,000 hills. I'm happy to see so many old friends here. I'm sure I'll have time to catch up on a few things. Now, I've been counting now to agree where is the medicine, how will it be taken, who will give it, and so on. I hope this session will be an opener in that direction. This report is a result of an outstanding cooperation between the African Development Bank, the OECD. 3 points, and then I'd like to give way. Each time I've heard about Africa rising, I've also heard 3 subtitles. Whose Africa is rising? In fact, there is a story now in Senegal that you don't eat economic growth. People are asking, economies are growing, and so what? I think we need to be careful, but where are the jobs? I think today, as you tackle the global value chains, you will be able to see where there are jobs. The reality of the numbers, which I'm sure you'll be discussing again, show some stark numbers. We've got services increasing, industry declining, agriculture is declining, but is there transformation? I hope this afternoon we can tackle that. Now, the nations all over have prospered by tapping into global trade and global capital, and Africa cannot be different. So I do hope that this afternoon we can delve into these issues. We have got a great panel, a great speaker. I want once again to invite.
And you sent the message home. The president made a comment about someone saying we don't eat growth. I mean, we get to hear a lot about that as these discussions continue. How transformational is that growth, and what are the indicators of, or at least the tools we can use to making sure that that growth expands. There's always this fight of access of markets by Africans on wanting to get to the countries of the North when they can't even at least to keep it gender balanced and being sensitive here. Ambassador Valentine Rugwabiza, Chief Executive, Rwanda Development Board. Mr. Mario Pensini, Director, OECD Development Center. And Angela Lusigi, Policy Advisor, Macroeconomics.
Un grand merci d'abord pour cette invitation à m'exprimer devant vous aujourd'hui. J'y ai été très sensible. Donald Kaberuka, comme beaucoup d'entre vous ici cet après-midi, c'est que le rapport que vous avez en main, que la Banque africaine de développement, l'OCDE et le PNUD rendent public aujourd'hui, représente à mes yeux une innovation majeure. Pour la première fois, il détaille le résultat de recherches approfondies sur les chaînes de valeur en Afrique et sur le rôle majeur qu'elles sont appelées à jouer dans le développement sur votre continent et enfin aux conséquences à en tirer du point de vue d'un certain nombre de politiques publiques. D'abord, les grandes tendances de la structure des échanges internationaux. Nous savons tous que l'économie mondiale a connu des transformations majeures au cours des dernières décennies, que l'on peut résumer par ce concept de globalisation, et dont tout laisse à penser qu'elles vont se poursuivre dans l'avenir. C'est l'hypothèse que fait le rapport. Je partage ce point de vue. Au plan économique, cette globalisation, la chaîne de production qui, très longtemps, était restée nationale ou locale, se traduit dans un chiffre simple. Il y a 20 ans, le contenu moyen en importation des exportations était de 20%. Il est aujourd'hui de 40%. Il sera dans 20 ans probablement de 60%. Simultanément, intégration de ces processus de production de plus en plus multipliés. Rôle évidemment très important des multinationales qui construisent, dirigent, arbitrent ces chaînes de production, qu'elles soient dominées du côté du producteur qui cherche à rejoindre le consommateur ou qu'elles soient dominées du côté de l'acheteur qui souhaite intégrer sa chaîne en amont. Une interpénétration de plus en plus complexe et totale des biens et des services, ce qu'on appelle la servicification de ces chaînes, que ce soit la Russie, d'autres en général dépourvus de ces ressources naturelles en quantité suffisante, s'orientons plutôt sur les ressources humaines. C'est le cas de la Chine, c'est le cas de l'Europe, c'est le cas de l'Inde. Et entre les deux, les États-Unis, le continent africain, des pays comme l'importance relative des obstacles aux échanges, ce qui a des conséquences, nous le verrons dans un instant, sur les questions d'ouverture commerciale. En très gros, depuis très très longtemps, depuis en gros que le premier roi de Crète a signé le premier traité de commerce avec le pharaon d'Égypte, l'ouverture des échanges, ça consistait à traiter, diminuer, éliminer, classiques, mais de mesures nouvelles, ce qu'on appelle les barrières non tarifaires. Le problème étant là, non plus d'éliminer ces barrières non tarifaires, personne ne va accepter de réduire à un maximum de résidus de pesticides dans des fleurs coupées, étant de noter, comme le fait à juste titre le rapport, que la capacité à matcher ces normes et ces standards qui correspondent à des barrières non tarifaires est devenue maintenant probablement la clé d'entrée essentielle d'un producteur, d'un pays, dans ces chaînes de production. On songe souvent à grands traits ces évolutions impactent-elles spécifiquement le continent africain et son développement, sol et sur les ressources humaines. La prolifération, l'extension de ces chaînes de valeur, à bien des égards, est une bonne nouvelle pour votre économie. À partir du moment où c'est sur un de ces secteurs, de ces chaînes de production, que l'on peut développer un avantage comparatif, le ticket d'entrée au marché global en est d'autant réduit. Ça réduit donc, on peut le voir dans le pays qui nous accueille aujourd'hui, le Rwanda, la capacité de surmonter ces étapes que des processus classiques d'industrialisation ou de processus de production de biens et des services exigeaient sont ouvertes. Je n'y reviens pas, ce sont des questions bien connues, bien identifiées. Les réseaux de transport, les réseaux d'énergie, dans certains cas, encore une fois, je le répète, pas au Rwanda, la difficulté de mettre en place des formations techniques, notamment sous forme d'apprentissage, et nous savons que c'est un secteur dans lequel il reste beaucoup à faire. L'ouverture des échanges. Ces évolutions signifient qu'il faut, d'une manière générale, mais surtout en Afrique, envisager les... Et ceci a des conséquences majeures, notamment parce que cela signifie la fin de la notion de préférence, qui est celle qui a préférentiel. Je vais mettre un droit de douane 0 sur les fleurs rwandaises, je vais mettre un droit de douane supérieur sur les fleurs costaricaines, et je vais mettre, par exemple, du Rwanda, alors il n'y a plus de préférence possible. Les standards réglementaires de ces systèmes d'administration de la précaution se feront, et évidemment, la grande question étant de savoir si ça se fera au niveau multilatéral ou si ça se fera au niveau bilatéral. Dernier point, comment ces évolutions, ces transformations, qui ont un impact spécifique sur un objectif, pour ce qui est de la croissance, qui est l'accroissement de la valeur ajoutée domestique. Chacun sait que le positionnement d'un pays ou d'une région dans ces chaînes de valeur devient un objectif stratégique essentiel, à condition, bien sûr, qu'on soit capable de le mesurer, et le rapport insiste à juste titre sur les nouvelles commerces international en valeur ajoutée. Donc il devient essentiel de focaliser l'attention sur cet objectif et d'être capable de le mesurer correctement, ce qui ne va pas de soi. Chaque pays devra, McKinsey, et je ne fais de publicité pour personne, a fort bien identifié ce qu'ils appellent ces deux espaces à temps différents, les et dans lesquels cette rentabilité est précoce, et le secteur public devant de son côté focaliser son attention, et notamment pour tout ce qui est des systèmes de formation, d'éducation, celle des multinationales qui sont les plus actives dans le développement de ces chaînes de production mondiale, qu'il s'agisse de l'automobile, qu'il s'agisse de la chimie, de la pharmacie, de l'agroalimentaire, ou qu'il s'agisse de secteurs comme la banque. De production plutôt domestique et d'obstacles aux échanges plutôt d'ordre tarifaire, c'est évidemment la nécessité de l'intégration régionale. On pense toujours, et c'est bien normal, aux infrastructures, à la facilitation des échanges sur laquelle qui gouverne les standards, les normes et les réglementations. Et l'Afrique, une fois de plus, parce qu'elle peut brûler des étapes, peut aller directement à cette étape d'intégration régionale. Sur ce point, avant de conclure, si telle est bien la priorité, si telle est bien la direction dans laquelle il faut porter le regard pour le développement de vos économies, alors c'est de dépendre très peu de régulation bilatérale en matière d'échange. Par rapport à d'autres pays, si je puis mettre un obstacle classique du type droit de douane ou subvention qui distordent les échanges, il n'est pas bien armé, ne serait-ce que parce qu'il n'est pas mandaté pour organiser, monitorer, surveiller des processus multilatéraux d'armes. Ils y passent tous l'essentiel de leur temps pour savoir comment, de ce point de vue, les intérêts africains seront-ils les mieux servis. Si les Européens et les Américains ont une économie d'échelle à tout le monde, il y a un moins bon côté qui est que être obligé d'appliquer un standard, qu'il soit public ou qu'il soit privé d'ailleurs, à la détermination duquel on n'a pas participé, peut être, à juste titre, à mon avis, considéré comme une marque en insistant sur un point. Le rapport qui vous est présenté aujourd'hui a un énorme avantage, c'est de vous projeter sur l'avenir. Trop souvent, c'est mon expérience, et je peux maintenant le dire librement, trop souvent, pensable ou prévisible, il y a 30 ou 40 ans de cela. Le monde de 30 ou 40 ans de cela est un monde très, très ancien. Les évolutions qui se sont faites devant ces 20 ou 30 dernières années, vous libérer. Merci pour votre attention.
Mr. Lamine, thank you very much for that very concise delivery you've given, I think, PPs that are mutually beneficial. Regional integration for easing ways of doing business. Priorities have also changed, he says. He ends with a plea that says Africans should be foresighted. Professor Ntuli Ngube, sir.
Of Africa, economic performance of Africa, mention what the drivers are, what the risks are, but also try to answer the question, whose growth is it? My colleagues at UNDP spent a lot of time looking at the human condition, as you can imagine, and in their presentation will say more about the impact on the human condition. And Mario Pezzini from OECD will say a lot more about global value chains and the opportunity they present for sustaining Africa's growth. I hope I can move these slides. If not, I'll speak through. Basically, pre-crisis, economic crisis, we saw robust growth in Africa. We went through the turbulent crisis, deep crisis phase, and now here we are, almost post-crisis, but not quite post-crisis. I think it's mutating, frankly. So Africa's growth can really be tracked through those three distinct phases, and each year we have an idea as to what's been going on. If you look at the growth, for instance, for 2012, of 4.9%, 5% for 2013, in 2014 and 2015, closer to 6%. That's our expectation for the sub-Saharan Africa region. So quite clearly, let me call it a twin-track Africa, so to say, north-south, but all resilient growth, I dare say. I mean, compared to the global growth of about 3%, I think you'll agree with me that things are going rather well. Countries, oil exporting countries. The interesting thing is that even the net oil importers are growing quite fast, and that really speaks to the quality of economic policies that are being pursued by these countries. So growth is not only confined to the oil. Actually, it is the poorest countries that are showing the strongest growth. They're able to demonstrate that they too can grow, and this is encouraging. It means perhaps that this growth is sustainable, but we know that fundamentally we need to deal with structural transformation, make it more inclusive, take advantage of opportunities such as global value chains to really sustain it so that it impacts on the broader population and creates opportunity for all. Let me press on just a regional distribution of growth. In 2013, you can see North Africa, as I said, 1.9%, Southern Africa, 3%, East Africa at 6.2%, Central Africa, 3.7%, West Africa, 9%, East Africa at 6%, North Africa recovering there at 3.1%. Some of the fastest growing countries, you can see, I can't read, so I'll read it from here. I see Liberia, Sierra Leone, Chad, Angola, DRC, Congo, Ethiopia, just to mention a few. I'm sure someone will challenge that and say, I know a few other countries that will do just as well. But that's how it's distributed. So it's quite spread out in terms of fastest growing countries, so to say, except for the north of Africa. Some of the slowest growing, and even slow in Africa really means a growth of still above 2.5% by global standards. You can see Morocco, Cape Verde, ODA or FDI or portfolio flows. They're the largest flows in Africa is remittances. Those continue to be part of Africa's growth story. But of course, so is ODA is playing a role, so is FDI, just in terms of resource flows into Africa. Again, do not underestimate the impact of domestic demand into Africa. It is driving a good part of Africa's growth. It's not just commodities, but sheer domestic demand or private consumption is part of the story. I'll say a little bit about the African middle class in a moment when I get to it. But also that what that could happen globally, and I dare say that we're seeing that the impact of Europe is about 0.24% drop in growth for every 1% drop. So that's probably the zone that's having the biggest impact on African growth in terms of slowdown, and all the other zones are not as strong. that we've taken into account. I'm afraid to say that in some of the African countries, we're beginning to see macroeconomic imbalances begin to emerge. Macro policy getting out of line, whether you're looking at inflation levels, budget deficits, current account, and so forth, input cover levels, exchange rate volatility. In some countries, is beginning to worry us a bit, but we have full confidence in the capacity of the officials to rein in on any fiscal imbalances that need to be taken care of, so as to bring the macro environment under control and then allow growth, which these issues have been done. And we should be wary that going forward, it could get expensive for African countries to issue bonds in the international market. Now, there's one issue that I need to mention, is the issue of GDP rebasing. Basically, the size of the African economy at the moment is about $1.52 trillion after the Nigeria's rebasing exercise. And it's incredible. Rebased 20 years ago or something. They're so far behind. And the impact of this exercise of rebasing would be quite dramatic. That's why I think that 30% of GDP in Africa really needs to be, is not being measured properly. A lot is happening, and you see dramatic changes with the rebasing exercise. Let me move slightly faster. I just want to mention a few things about whose growth is this? Is the growth inclusive? What are the inclusive growth issues? Africa's poverty level is currently about 48% in terms of just headcount of those living 20 years. Whose growth is this? Is it impacting on poverty? And there are some countries that are going to struggle to reduce poverty. We're finding, for instance, a country such as DRC, Congo, is having difficulty, will have difficulties in reducing poverty unless certain steps are done. At the other extreme, Ethiopia, for instance, because again of the policies that are being followed, we will find it easy in countries. For some countries, it is inclusive. For example, we are finding that in Ethiopia, in Burkina Faso, in Lesotho, even in Tunisia, relatively speaking, Gambia, Guinea, growth is slightly more pro-poor, slightly more inclusive. And countries such as Madagascar, Tanzania, Cote d'Ivoire, just to mention a few, not all countries, it is less inclusive compared to the group that I mentioned earlier. So we regressed back to poverty. What drives it is education, sometimes is governance, it is access to credit so that they can start businesses. It's also urbanization. It drives a lot of what you see in Africa in terms of the growth of middle class. In terms of initial work shows that Southern Africa is the most globally integrated so far, and other regions need to catch up. I mean, in this area such as finance, manufacturing, electric machinery, the transport equipment, and it's least integrated when it comes to agriculture and textiles. So
time, but tight on time. So I won't raise the issues that you raised. I'll bring them in the discussion. So if, sir, if you come, and could you help me with managing the time? I'm pleading.
Distinguished friends, real pleasure to be with you. This time that almost 200 million people aged between 15 and 20 years old make Africa as the youngest continent, or if you prefer, the youngest population in the world. We said this was an extraordinary opportunity, but it could become a threat in case in which young people, having left in certain cases extreme poverty, and therefore with expectation, the number of children reduced in families, and therefore, as it was said before, we saw in Southeast Asia that today has rate of growth of 5.4 this year, whilst Africa 4.8, better than Latin America, that is below 3%, but anyhow not at the rhythm of Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia was capable to use low wages labor force, but also with certain qualification. Africa, comparative advantage, may be labor force, but it's also natural. How can we avoid the Dutch disease phenomena that was not born in Africa, as you can hear from the name, and is experimented in many other countries? Well, here comes the issue of this year, and we said we have to address global value chain, because they may represent an opportunity to propose a car Nowadays, you can split the car in 10,000 pieces and produce them in different places, each one specialized in one of the phases of production. These phenomena allow to reduce in one product. Well, it's impressive. Most trade is now in intermediate goods, not in final goods. 60% of trade is in this type of product. So there is a possibility to enter without the necessary critical mass of the past. And does it help to develop? You know how to produce manufacturing, how to specialize. You know the condition of a market, the services you need, and the supplier that you may afford. But if this is the case, therefore, how much Africa at present is taking advantage of this global value chain? We have seen that the non-OECD economy have been growing in the production of intermediate share of the production of intermediary goods. 20 years ago was producing only 1.4% of the overall production of intermediary goods. Today, has almost doubled, but we remain to percentages that are of value, but sources much less than other regions from other African countries of its export. So, if this is the picture, there is a lot of opportunity, but effort to make. And the efforts can go in different directions, because every individual global value chain is different. And also the role that one can play within global value chain is different. Global value chain is not a train that is passing and you have to decide which one you will catch. Global value chain is something that you have to build in order to make the train stop. And here comes the different strategies that need to be put in place. Sometimes, as in the production of cocoa, is the producer, at least in distribution, and reach the final market. In Africa, Blue Skies is just an example of who was capable to produce and quickly sell. Why is this crucial, what I'm saying? Because in many cases, we are talking about trade, but things about logistics is fundamentally asking for just-in-time delivery. Therefore, there are many things to be done. But there are barely two extreme scenarios. The first scenario is to take advantage of what is happening in other emerging countries. Develop growth, produced wealth, but now this wealth was not completely distributed, inequalities grew, and now in China we see growing social conflict and wages. And now there is the research to subcontract elsewhere part of the production, because elsewhere you can find lower wages. This is an interesting, but I would call low-scale productive transformation. Yes, it's possible to improve production. It has always been done in OECD countries and in others. Obviously, it requires policy. They are already in place. Brazil, India, Indonesia, South Africa are doing policy to strengthen the comparative advantages and the capacity to compete of their economic structure for African countries. Things are already happening. The important point is to draw the crucial lesson to continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. May I now call upon Angela from UNDP, please. Inflation has eaten a little bit in your presentation.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I have 3 key messages. A few years ago, we were talking very much about the Millennium Development Goals. And one of the things we said that if we were to achieve the goals, then the minimum growth rate to be achieved was at least 7%. We know we're nowhere near that. Some countries are doing better than others, but on the whole, a lot more needs to be done. We're talking about uneven development. It's not just between countries. It's even within countries. It's within communities. And this is creating a problem. We're also saying that our human development is vulnerable to shocks. We've seen a lot of progress, But as soon as we get an economic shock, an environmental shock, a political shock, we move very many steps behind. So clearly this is something that we need to pay attention to. Going forward, in the report, we've evaluated the 4 key things that need to be on Africa's development agenda for the future. And we're happy that this is already part of Agenda 2063 and is part of the ongoing discussion post-2015. These are inclusion, gender equality, youth empowerment, and environmental on the vertical. And on the horizontal, what is your change in your non-income components of the Human Development Index? So there are some countries that are doing both. They're growing both in the non-income components and as well as their income components. And there are some countries that, although they're improving, getting higher incomes, they're not able to attain their social objectives. This is health or education outcomes. And then on the right bottom to the labor market are excluding young people. So they're not able to participate in the growth that is actually taking place. They're not able to get those jobs in the productive sectors. So they're not able to pull themselves out of poverty. We're also saying that a lot has been done with regard to gender equality. We've had a lot of progress. It's very good that 1 in 5 parliamentarians in Africa is a woman, and we're actually in a country which is doing much better than that. But we also know that there are other countries that are not doing as well. But the most important thing is that although we're making gains in certain indicators, we have not yet translated this into the sharp reversal of the long-standing inequalities between women and men in access to resources and control over these resources. So that's why we think that it's paramount to address this issue. And then also the issue of environmental sustainability. Most of our economies are based on natural resources, whether we're talking about natural resource extraction, whether we're talking about energy, agriculture, fishing. This is key for the future of our continent. So whenever we're looking at our strategies going forward, we really need to choose innovation. And this is very helpful in strengthening their bargaining positions so that they're able to gain more from integration in value chains. We also focus very much on agricultural value chains because we believe that these contribute to social transformation and community resilience. Why is this? Well, because if you are integrated in value chains in diversified agricultural commodities, then you're able to reduce your vulnerability. If one commodity goes south, at least you have expectations for benefiting from other commodities. You're also able to raise your agricultural productivity and multiply livelihood opportunities. And then a final point in this area is that we don't often think about value chains in the context of post-conflict environments. And we think that the participate in value chains, then they expose themselves to higher levels of risk. As was mentioned by my colleague, there's multinational corporations are now solidifying and concentrating a lot of the power when it comes to supply-driven value chains, which means that poor wealth and improve livelihoods, or it can lead to deprivation and exclusion. So there are roles for the government and the private sector and cooperatives to maximize the benefits and reduce the risks related to value chains. So finally, deepen the social safety nets that will allow poor and marginalized groups to engage in global value chains. We're also talking about how private sector actors can promote collective action. There's an issue about power and control over resources, so there's definitely room for poor and small-scale producers and suppliers to have collective action in order to improve their capacity to engage. And then financial services, then smaller suppliers are able to take these hits. They're able to absorb the impact of these changes in the circumstances and be able to continue participating in the global value chains. This is what we talk about when we say export resilience. And then finally, streamlining regional trade procedures. We know a lot about regional integration. We've been talking a lot about regional integration, but there are also the issue about non-trade barriers. There are issues that have been talked about long delays in the borders, the issues we have about being able to cross borders within Africa. So these are some of the issues that we really need to take into account if we want to have the maximum benefit from global value chains. Thank you.
Angela, thank you very much for those salient points that you've brought out. And that's really where we come to the end of the presentations. And we only have one person that hasn't spoken. So I'm sorry, ma'am, I'm going to have to put your head on the block and start asking you a question. What I must say is we don't have much time, so I'll just ask this question to Madam Rugwiza, and then I'll come to the floor. So if you have any issues you need to raise that you have heard from here, please let's get ready. We've had to agree with him. Professor Ngube says, you know, some countries are doing it, some poor countries are doing it, and I wanted to argue with him and say, well, you know, if you start at ground zero, anything upwards is progress. we could look at that. And Mr. Bettini also says that something is happening. Do you agree with all you have heard today?
They are all right. Le président de la banque, Kaberuka, a commencé en disant, en réalité, nous avons aujourd'hui suffisamment de matériaux pour savoir ce qui impacte les chaînes de valeur, ce qui doit être fait. Et il faudrait peut-être ce qui serait en addition de ce diagnostic, c'est de savoir comment ça se fait et où est-ce que ça se fait, où est-ce que ça a pu se faire et comment ça a pu se faire. L'avènement des chaînes de valeur, je pense qu'il est important de le dire, n'est pas en politique des échanges de manière très simple. Daniel, je pense que plus que jamais, avec les chaînes de valeur ajoutées, plus que jamais, avec les chaînes de valeur, le temps. Le temps est devenu, dans le contexte de l'intégration dans le corridor du Nord, en matière de temps, il y a des choses qui sont frappantes, qui sont en train de se passer sur le continent. En matière de temps, eh bien, aujourd'hui, les imports participent à 40% des exports. Donc, l'impact sur la compétitivité des entreprises qui vont exporter à partir de Kampala. Avec les valeurs ajoutées, un élément central, il était déjà un élément important de compétitivité, il est devenu un élément encore plus central. Un troisième élément, c'est l'élément de la simplicité. Les bénéfices qui sont à la clé sont des bénéfices absolument impressionnants. Un quatrième élément, et je suis d'accord avec tous mes collègues ici, c'est l'élément des ressources humaines.
I'll stop you on the fourth point, Madam. I just want us to interact, so because I'll come back to you. I just want to test growth that we are seeing, and what is it that they are doing right that probably we can start to learn from? Because otherwise, we keep harping, I think, Prof.
It all starts with policy leadership. It is the right policy leadership that will deliver the sustainable.
Prof, I just want to come in because I hear this a lot, and I think we need to talk practicalities. Africa generally, from Ghana downwards, we are almost all 50 years old as far as the shackles of bondage are concerned. We still need to learn, our governments still need to learn about these points you're making?
Absolutely.
Stay at the top. Is there any comments from the floor? Do we have roving mics that people can use? Any comments? Okay. Yeah, I think we'll need mic. I might not hear the clapping all the time.
My name is... I cannot compete with the best racetrack, or in other words, at the racetrack. So it means that the developed countries and African countries are no way to compete. I mean, there is no way for many African countries to compete with industrialized countries. Second, the issue is serious paradox. Harmonization, you mentioned.
Yeah, last point. Last point, please. Yeah. Mr. Lamin, you spoke about foresight, which really I caught on. And the points that the professor is raising are very important. He's saying that we talk of competitiveness, but can I really compete when I don't have the tools? Can you?
Adds value, and that creates growth, and that triggers entrepreneurship. We all know these problems are there. But little by little, they are being solved. So there's nothing like, in my view, and that's the experience for the last, let's say, 15 years, and I spent quite a bit of time in this continent.
I don't agree with one small point, because I don't think it's when you have a blanket statement like that, then you ignore a lot of the positive things that are already happening on the continent. We have a growing number of youthful entrepreneurs who are breaking the barriers and using whatever is available to them. I think it's a blanket statement. I think we should be looking at how can we learn from these experiences, how can we help them to remove the barriers so that they grow bigger, and how can we even promote South-South cooperation so that we can bring...
It's a big subject, we all know, but how far should it go? Customs union, monetary union, and is there some model out there? And please don't say the EU.
It's obviously trade and barriers. It's also implementation of policies. How many meetings took place in the experience of regional integration where public officials exchanged to each other what they were doing? How do you do HCCT? Dialogue, places in which people share their experiences. Sometimes we are unconscious of the fact that we have done it.
I think the point is not we don't need regional integration, it's just how far do you go? Otherwise, you continue
but
mutating.
I want to stress the qualitative aspect of regional integration and not just the aspects that are related to trade barriers and so on. Let me add of trade barrier that still are very high.
Thank you very much. Is there, I see a lot of male hands up. Could we have ladies too? List am accused of not being gender sensitive.
Like the breakout of the Ebola virus in Mali, for example. No matter how much economic growth you have, once that type of stuff hits your country, then everything goes to regression. So what's been done about that? And
pragmatic approach. I didn't mention the cost element, but it's clearly, if it was an option a few decades ago, of the economies. Now, clearly, when it comes to regulatory issues, those are becoming much more difficult. Are we going to agree on exactly the same standards? Will. Political will just put in action and having in place, making sure, the monitoring, making sure that is happening. What has happened in the Northern Corridor within a year, economic growth will happen only if you have a population that is in good health. And that was pretty clear, at least when it comes to Rwanda, it was clear. That is an element we focused on by providing the universal health coverage.
It's not things like Ebola and so forth. It's just temporary. It's actually the outbreak of conflict. Conflict is the biggest driver of growth regression in Africa. When a country goes into full-scale conflict, it typically takes at least 15 years to recover. We've done a lot of work on this. There's a couple of communities within the same country, people feeling excluded, the capture of power by the elite and the benefits thereof, all those, not sharing the natural resource revenues fairly. That will drive conflict. So conflict is the big...
That's true. Sir, I'll come to you. I've seen a lady here, but I don't know. Is there a mic here? If you could put a point across, maybe the panelists you're directing to, short, succinct to the point.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Amata Diabate. I'm from countries work hard toward alleviating poverty, having lower percentage of people trying to meet the MDG goals of poverty alleviation, but then given some external shocks. One of the issues about the Sustainable Development Goals is about the governance issue.
Madam, I think we got the point there. How do we sustain it? Once we have reached a certain level, Prof, how then do we stay there?
One cow poor family program is working wonders, in my view. Maybe others disagree. So that's one way. Of course, jobs are the ultimate key. If you have a job, you protect yourself against most.
You don't have a pension because you were in the formal economy. So there are several factors that strengthen further the importance of social protection system. And I agree with Mtuli, it would be important to study certain cases. Brazil is one. Fiscal revenue, which is below 15% of GDP. So between 32 of Brazil and 15, there is a wide difference, which means that very often the public sector doesn't have the capacity.
So Pazzini said, it's all about jobs. But I want us to understand the sheer impossibility, for example, of creating 100,000 jobs these days. Dr. Rugwabiza talked about the lead time between Mombasa Port and not as relevant as we used to be in the supply chain. And that creates a huge problem for us in Africa. Therefore, what we need is a serious structural transformation in terms of the way we think, because, of course, the world itself has really transformed from the way it was 20, 30 years ago. These days, technology...
The beginning, why do we have to warm up? We must just get into it. This warming up thing, and then we lose time. I would like to thank the panelists here, Mr. Pascal Lamin, Professor Ngube, Angela Lesigi, Mr. Pretzin, and and appreciate it, Madam. Thank you, Prof. Thank you. Appreciate it, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam. Ça va?